everybody. Welcome back to Great Mondays Radio. Oh, my goodness. Well, if we thought things were uncertain in the job market, boy, 6 months ago, they're even more uncertain now. And we have someone on today, Jillian O'Malley, who is an expert in employer value propositions. And she's going to argue that now or when things are uncertain, it is the moment when hiring is frozen or we're not sure what it's going to bring. Now is the moment to actually invest in defining your employer value proposition. Jillian O'Malley is an expert in employer value propositions, worked with companies, many companies in healthcare, as well as brands like Noom, Zillow, and Kimberly Clark. Jillian, welcome to Great Mondays Radio.
Thank you so much, Josh. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about how you got into EVPs, what brought you here. I think you and I share a love and history of brand, right?
Yeah.
So that is, I think, a good place to start. But then, tell us how you got into the whole EVP thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started my whole marketing and brand career in-house and doing very much B2B kind of brand and marketing work. But being the person that I am, I can't help but kind of like stick my fingers in multiple pots wherever I'm working. And I got very involved in culture at a lot of the companies that I was working at, and how can we influence brand a little more internally. And as I was doing that, I ended up moving over to what used to be KRT Marketing, which was a recruitment marketing and employer brand agency. It was purchased in 2019 by Recruitix. And I was there for about 7.5 years building their branding creative offering into something
Hmm.
truly substantial and starting to look at EVP and look at employer brand as, oh, it's not just this thing I can kind of like do because I'm interested in within another company. I can actually build this into something substantial at an agency for other companies.
Great.
Yeah.
I obviously believe, I don't know, obviously, but believe in the power of a strategic, well thought through employer value proposition. What would you what would you say are the benefits of, well, no, let's start back with what is an EVP?
Okay.
Let's start there.
All right. Textbook definition, what is an EVP? It is the definition of what you as an employer bring in terms of value to your employees. And then in reverse, a lot of times what people call the handshake or the give and the get, what the employees bring to the company in terms of value. And it's just really defining like, this is how we're going to show up for you. This is how we want you to show up for us at its core.
Mm-hmm.
That is just the textbook definition of what an EVP is. What a well-designed, well thought out EVP is, in my opinion, is a mirror to the culture of the company itself. It's not just this statement that you plaster across your career site and say, okay, we believe in blah, 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 blah. It's really meant to show your culture and drive your culture and find ways to really kind of anchor the conversation around who you are as a company in truth of this is who we are, this is what we do, and this is how we move forward together.
Um, when you're on, or when one is perusing the job boards, it
Mhm.
always starts with, here at company X, we believe in, A, B, and C,
Yes.
and you are X, Y, and Z. Um,
Yes.
is that uh, is that an employer value proposition?
I think that's what a lot of people would consider an employer value proposition. I think that's a lot of times what we build. And yeah, it is, but that's almost more like treating it like a messaging statement or like a PR campaign.
Mm.
And that's just skimming the surface of what it can really be. Um, and yeah, you see a lot of that. Basically, my thought is an EVP where if you were to find and replace the company name and it could work for almost anybody, it's probably not a very effective EVP. It's just a messaging statement.
I mean that, again, right? Like branding, like if you
Yeah.
point to any organization's external value proposition or tagline or
Mhm.
whatever it might be, and you can just swap it out, it's not that's a good litmus test.
Exactly. Same as because I've seen this with companies before, companies that just take that consumer tagline and add for you or for us at the end. They go, there we go, there's our EVP. And it's like,
Or together,
well,
comma.
yeah, together we
Yeah.
consumer tagline.
Yeah. That's funny. So what I think, here's what I have observed over the years, is the reason that I find this so compelling,
Mhm.
and how we get culture leaders to start to think about this in a more robust strategic way is the easy way to do it, or the way to do it when you're under a time crunch, is someone is going to be just writing that job description, and there might be some boilerplate,
Mhm.
and that is a very siloed way to approach it. So to me, what I see as, or what I hear in your commentary and our discussions,
Mhm.
is this implicit need to be cross silo, cross disciplinary. Who, one, is that a fair way to talk about it? And two, who needs to be in the room? What are we talking about when we're talking about like creating a strategic employer value proposition?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a big believer that it cannot be created in a boardroom, not EVP the way we need it for 2025 and moving forward. Um, and a lot of times, that's how they used to be built, and that's how you still see them being built sometimes is, okay, let's put together a few people from HR, a few people from talent acquisition, a couple leaders and marketing, and let's just put something together
Yep.
and have a PDF deck, and this is our EVP, and this is what we're saying. And then what you see happen is as you roll it out, your employees are going, oh, okay, that's what the experience is. Did you ask any of us? And so you see a lot of gaps with that when it's just this leadership-led thing that happens, in a closed room and they say, this is who we are.
Mm.
And you're not getting that voice of the folks who work here. And so a lot of times you don't get that internal buy-in, which is essential for the EVP to actually breathe and be something that's a true kind of living roadmap of who you are as an organization. So a
Is it
lot of times,
is
yeah,
it buy-in?
it's buy-in, but in this like much more, I would say almost like organic way. It's not buy-in the way you think of buy-in when it comes to your C-suite, where you're like, okay, well, let me present a deck,
Yeah.
get them
Get
to,
everybody on board. Oh, this is a
yeah,
good idea.
exactly. No, this is more buy-in in the terms of creating a movement within the organization and creating an advocacy for it.
Mm.
So a lot of times, what I firmly believe is EVPs actually need to be employee led. Now, that doesn't mean we don't have leadership input. We really need that because what leaders give us is they give us that aspiration of, yeah, this might be the reality today, but this is, here's the insight into where we're trying to get to. This is what we want to be as an organization. And having that super healthy balance of the employees saying, this is my day to day, and leadership saying, and this is where we're going to. And
Mm.
really, it should be a strategic roadmap for who you are as a company, what your culture is, and how you do work together to move the company forward.
Uh, EVP first, or define your culture first?
So, this is the interesting thing. I am a firm believer that EVP will help you define your culture
Mm.
because what you do is as you're getting into the EVP work, as you are talking to your employees, you are going to uncover things you never really thought about. A lot of times when we look at culture, especially at, I would say, larger companies where you're very spread out, you got a a lot of levels within the organization, there are things within your culture that not everybody's going to know about. That your chief HR officer is going to say, well, yeah, we implemented these policies, but not really understand, like, what do those policies look like on the ground level, the folks that get to experience them.
Mm.
And I'm a big believer that, like, when you're developing your EVP strategy, it's going to unlock a little bit of that. Oh, here's some interesting pockets within our culture that we maybe never really thought about, we maybe never really acknowledged. But for the folks who are coming in, let's say a retail organization, this piece of the culture that only exists in the stores amongst the associates that we don't really know about here at HQ, miles and miles away, sitting in our offices, but that is what's going to bring people in. Or in the inverse, this is what's going to drive people away.
Oh, that was exactly where I was going to go.
Yeah.
We're doing this excavation of the culture, and you're going to find some gems, but you're also going to find some fossilized poop.
Yeah.
What so okay, great. Gems, fantastic. We're going to, oh, interesting. Here's a pattern, or here's this thing, and great. What happens when we hit those like you're like, "Oh, this isn't so good. Do you just set it aside because you have a EVP to create? Like,
Yeah.
how do you deal with the when you uncover, like, because I think in my experience, I
Yeah.
will say, when you sit someone down and say, tell me about what's going on here, they're going to also want to tell you
Mhm.
what isn't going well because they often have not had the chance to do that. What do I do as a
Yeah.
culture leader when I hit those things that are unsavory?
Yeah, absolutely. You don't get scared of them, because at the end of the day, that is also the authenticity of who you are. That is the truth of who you are. And I think a lot of times, especially right now, with everything that is going on in our world, in our politics, in our country right now, there is a lot of apprehension around moving anything forward in I don't want to say a progressive way, but in a more truthful way. Because what we want to do is, when we find those little pockets of, like, ooh, this doesn't really work, people don't feel so great about that, we tend to want to do one of two things. We either want to bury them and say, okay, let's just put that aside, and we're just not going to look at this, and we're going to pretend a little bit like it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Or we want to overpower them with toxic positivity. And we say, oh, but maybe that's just your experience. And this is actually what we're doing. And, pay no attention to that man behind the curtain
Right.
kind of an experience. And let's just focus on the good. Let's only focus on the good. And the thing is that when we look at a lot of the audiences within the job market right now, because let's look specifically at millennial and Gen Z, right? As every day comes on, those are the people that are really taking over the job market right now. Those generations are moving up into the workplace in staggering numbers. They are also incredibly savvy and incredibly jaded when it comes to marketing propaganda.
They've got
They
excellent, very sensitive bullshit-o-meters.
absolutely, we have, because I'm an elder millennial, we have been bathed in advertising and marketing our entire lives in a way that no other generation has. And so we see right through that.
Yeah.
Like, wow, this is a lot of "we're so great" that the company is saying, and I can't find a single word from the folks that actually work here
Yeah.
about what this company is like. I call bullshit on that. I see right through it. And so, one of the big things that I always advocate for is, do not be scared of the stuff that might seem more negative. Turn it a little bit. Look at it as an opportunity for, hey, do you know what we did when we went through this? I'll give a great example. I was working on an EVP for a major health system. And they did a lot of things around, like, huge medical breakthroughs. That was a big part of their consumer brand is like, we're doing the stuff
Yeah.
that other hospitals just aren't doing. And it's very impressive and it's really incredible. And they were very, very mission focused and mission driven. And so as we were developing their EVP, one of the things that we noticed was, we would come into these focus groups with employees and we would say, okay, so, breakthroughs and innovation and all this great stuff. They're like, yeah, that's great. I have not been able to get toner for my printer in a month. And there was this fascinating disconnect where they were like, oh, yeah, I'm really tied to the mission of what we're doing and the incredible medical breakthroughs that we're making. But it is so hard for me to do just the day-to-day work that I have to do in this office to accomplish what I need to accomplish because these little systems that we don't focus on are broken.
Yeah.
And so, a lot of what we uncovered with that was, yeah, on paper, that might look like this really negative sentiment about the organization. But what it's showing is like, hey, when you focus all your attention and all your energy on the big picture, you forget about the little picture things that allow people the ease to deliver breakthroughs, to deliver innovation in a much stronger way for you. So how can you fix those little pieces of the culture that ultimately are not a heavy lift when you look at it? Some of it's just about better operating processes. Some of it's about redistributing budgets, whatever it might be, things that ultimately should not be a huge lift for you to do, but will have an enormous impact over time on the culture of the folks that work there, on the work that they're able to do, which then comes up into that broader picture of breakthroughs and innovation.
I can imagine the conversation where you said you come back to the client,
Mhm.
and this, this could be applied internally or externally, right? You're doing this work, and you're like, hey, here's all this great stuff that we created, and here's the platform, and here's all the da 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 da. Also, we have some things that we think you could correct, and then be like, what? We didn't ask for that,
Yeah.
right? Like, where does it fit in, right? Because it's like, I'm not. I don't know about you, but I've had 100% failure rate at bringing things to clients that they did not ask for.
Yeah.
What are
Yeah.
you doing? What are you doing with that stuff? Because yeah, it's going to come up. That's great. I love the way you're framing it and flip it around. And absolutely, that is correct. But someone might say, that might be true, but it's not helpful. I'm not interested in that right now. I'm not in charge of that right now. What do you do?
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
what are you doing with that? What
And
is Jillian doing with that?
yeah, we run into that all the time. And my kind of big standpoint is I'm not pointing out failures to you. I'm not pointing out failures of your culture. I'm not pointing out failures of your operating procedures or anything like that. I am giving you a real roadmap for how to grow and how to strategize and how to move forward in terms of who you are as a company and as an employer.
Okay.
And culture is not just the good, shiny, pretty things. I think we got into a little bit of this dangerous place with, things like Google and Meta coming up where they're like free food and bikes and ping pong tables and kombucha on tap and all these things. And people are like, yeah, that's culture. It's like, no, those are perks
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
That has nothing to do with kind of the heartbeat,
Yeah.
who you are as an organization, and at the end of the day, how you do the work. That's the real core of culture. How do you do the work? And how do you create an environment that allows your people to do the work? And so when we come up against these things, when we're developing an EVP and we say, like, hey, this is a common trend that we found, because we find a lot of really positive common trends. That organization I was talking about, every single person was so tied to the mission and had so much pride in being an employee there. It was beautiful to witness. And they all had, like, because it was a health system, they all had personal stories tied to, when I was a child and I was sick and this is where I went. It was really fantastic to
Yeah.
watch.
Yeah.
And those are just as true as the headaches of, like, hey, there's no real promotion paths here. There's no real place for growth. And that's frustrating because I want to be here, but I can't be here as long as I would like to if I have no idea what my growth and my career is going to look like.
Mm.
So what we give these organizations, to me, I think it's a real gift. Even if they don't necessarily interpret it that way, I try to explain to them, like, this is a gift. We're giving you insight that you're not necessarily going to get into. This is our roadmap forward. This is our growth strategy. These are the little pockets and the challenges that we were never going to find out just, you know, sitting in a room together or asking employees directly, because
Yeah.
people to be a lot more honest with the consultant coming in than they are with,
Yeah.
the head of HR that's down the hall from
Yeah.
them.
Yeah. Yeah. So we've established the case for doing this work.
Yeah.
What does it look like? Is there a standard framework or components of an EVP, or is it different every time, or is it a little bit of both?
So the way I do it, there's a pretty standard framework, and it's very much rooted in being something that is employee led, that's really about understanding who it is that you're trying to attract, who is that necessary audience for you, specifically your company, and what are the clear commitments that you can deliver on. I've done this for years now, and I've done quite frankly, the super fluffy EVPs
Yeah.
that are innovation collaboration starts with us and means nothing. And these pillars that are just marketing fluff and words that
Yeah.
mean nothing.
They will fill a page, but they're not going to mean anything to anybody.
Yeah, and they're not going to create the kind of impact that you need them to create. People will read them once and go, okay, great, whatever. And one of the big things that I've been working on in a lot of the consulting work I'm doing now is, how can we create something that is way more tangible than the EVP as we've known it
Hmm.
before, the EVP we've known for the past 10 or 15 years. And one of the big things that I'm working on is, what are the actual commitments you're making? Not like, there's room to grow here. What does that look like?
Hmm.
What are those growth paths?
Yep.
What kind of, do you allow your employees to have, a once a year meeting with your C-suite where they can talk about who they are and what they do to move the company forward?
Give me
What?
the tangible
Yeah,
examples of what this looks like.
sure.
Because, and I'll point back to your earlier point about millennials, Gen Z, even Gen Alpha, they aren't, they're just not going to buy, lock, stock, and barrel the the premise of you're going to grow here. You're like, exactly what does that mean? Or at least if you have examples, it's going to anchor it and it's going to make it more memorable from a very basic, like storytelling, human psychology, marketing 101. Give me specific examples. Here is what, you're going to be an individual contributor, 1, 2, 3, 4, then you're going to move to manager, or
Yep.
here's how, here, you get X dollars to invest in conferences or learning, or here's our L&D group.
Mhm.
Those are the things that are gonna sell it,
Yeah.
to the people that you want to show up to be the best people inside of your organization.
Exactly. That's exactly it. Or, another great example is a big kind of buzzword within culture and within EVP right now is, the idea of mental health,
Mm-hmm.
and work-life balance and well-being within the workplace.
Yep.
And it's great and it's wonderful. And you're seeing this pop up in EVP pillars all over the place now. The way I approach EVP is, okay, so what do you want to talk about mental health? Great. How many PTO days do you specially allot for people to take for mental health breaks, where they can just say, I just need a day to myself today and I can use my PTO for that without, having to incur anything.
Yeah.
Um, what kind of budget are you putting into things like clinical peer groups where people can get together and just talk about the weight of work in a safe environment? Are you doing things like that? Are you investing in, A lot of companies will do things like, oh, well, we have, a subscription to the Calm app or, some kind of meditative
Yeah.
app. Those
Yeah.
things are great too, but it's also like, are you providing a stipend for certain things that are specifically related to mental health that people can do on their own
Yeah.
that suit them specifically?
Yeah.
Or is the health care that you're providing, are you making sure that those packages have really robust and really healthy mental health services within them?
Hmm. Hmm.
Those are the clear, tangible commitments that when you say your mental health matters to us, and here's why. Here's the three actual tangible things that when you sign your contract, you get with us the second you start.
The where okay, so I love that, anchoring in specific examples. If you find yourself saying, well, I don't have a specific example, well, that means you're not invested in that, and that's not a reality. You
Yeah.
can stretch towards it. You
Yeah.
could aspire. I mean, one of the tenets or premises that I try to encourage my clients to work on is, stretching, forward and up, right? So it's like it doesn't have to be whatever you're stating in your EVP. You can have room for this is what we're working on because no one's perfect, and I think that's squarely where some of those more difficult uncoverings might show up.
100%. I'm a big believer that every company, every single company I've worked with, every single company I've worked at, progress over perfection every single day. Do not wait until you have the most perfect culture set up.
You'll be waiting forever.
Yeah, it's never going to exist.
You'll be wait, yeah.
So, yeah, locking in on this is what we have today, and then this is what we're moving towards. Just that honesty in and of itself, that goes a long way too, because no one's expecting you to be perfect. No one's expecting to apply to a company and say, like, this is going to check all my boxes. This is going to be the perfect place for me. I'm going to be here for 40 years.
Yeah. But it's not, I would even go further. It's not like no one expects you to be perfect, but to your earlier point, everybody expects authenticity, which means imperfection. And that's okay. That's
Mhm.
going to resonate and be like, here are the things, as long as it's like, here are the things we're working on. Because what I have found, and this comes with communications and the lack thereof, is I don't know what we're going to do about this, and I'm supposed to know everything, so I'm not going to say anything. No, you can say, here's a challenge, and I don't know where I'm headed with this.
Mhm.
Uh, any stories or examples of kind of the most clever or creative or unique places that an EVP has shown up for a client, or has a client has put forth, right? So I think the common ones are Glassdoor and LinkedIn. You're going to have a page, and you're going to have a page on your own website about our culture. Those are kind of the standard. Any unique or interesting evolutions of that? Are we seeing it on social media? Are there ways for this to kind of pop up in new ways that we haven't thought of?
Yeah, I think social media is, and I know we've been talking about social media for years, and we've been talking about specifically like TikTok for a few years now, but social media is a great way for you to really look at not just what your employer brand looks like, but that's also the best platform to have a voice from other than the company. And
Yeah.
so one of the big things, I was working with another healthcare company a couple of years ago, and they were trying to identify, how can we kind of lock in on our employer brand? How can we find better stories? And I told them, I said, you know what we need to do? I said, let's look through some of the hashtags that are related to your company specifically on Instagram, because this was a few years ago where Instagram was a bigger platform than TikTok. And let's look through and just see what's being spoken about there. And there was a ton of stuff that was like very consumer based, of people that were getting care at this health system. But what we were also finding were employees that on their own private platforms were talking about their work at this organization. One thing specifically that we found is we found a nurse who was working in their NICU, And she had this beautiful story about I was a NICU baby at this hospital when I was born, and now I'm a NICU nurse at the
Mm,
exact same hospital that I was born at.
hmm.
And she had so much and this was just, it wasn't for the company, it was just for her and how much pride she had in the work that she did and how much pride she had in her own personal story. And I had gone to the TA team and I said, "Did you even know about this?" And it turned out, a lot of the uh, leadership that this particular nurse worked with at this hospital knew her story, but it never trickled up to corporate. It never
Yeah.
trickled up to TA. And I was
Yeah.
like, latch onto this.
Yeah.
It's such a beautiful story. It's a lot of that kind of human interest story that everybody loves. People love kind of hearing things like that. And she's so invested in the company in her own personal way. It's a beautiful expression of your employer brand without her even realizing that that's what she was doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've I find social media both a huge opportunity and I think executives can see it as a big risk.
Oh, yeah.
And I think there's a lot of pushback. You want me to spend my time doing, spending my social capital on this business, like you're going to tell me to put hashtag, this company employer, like how do you navigate that? I wasn't going to get into the specific tactics, but it's just feels so, gosh, I have seen this conversation so many times. And so you're talking about an organic story. And if the organization is big enough people, enough scale, then you may be able to find all those and surface those in interesting ways. What what do you how do you mitigate those, potential pitfalls of either folks hijacking it and just saying, they haven't listened to me about the ink toner, like I'm gonna come, I'm gonna start to talk about it here.
Yeah.
Like what are some ways, I'm not saying we have the solution, but what are some ways to more effectively use social media that that reveals this authenticity,
Mhm.
that speaks to the positivity, that is aligned with what you are trying to articulate to the world without, I don't know, like coercing employees to do it? Like what how do you start to think about that?
No, absolutely. I think, one of the big things that people need to realize is you are never, ever going to wrap your hands completely around a social strategy. It is too big, it is too
Okay.
far reaching, it's too nebulous. And you can't have that kind of control. I think specifically about, you know, massive companies like, let's say, Amazon, where you have tons of people who
Mm,
work for Amazon in some capacity. Almost all of them have their own social media channels. There is no way you can assume full control over the narrative of who Amazon is with that number of employees. People are going to be out there recording themselves working, talking about their work to their audience of 25 people, and they're still going to be investing in their own way in your employer brand narrative. You're never going to be able to wrap your arms completely around it. Now, what you can do is you can steer the narrative a little bit more and let those be outliers. And the things that I have found is the companies that get a little bit scared and they say, I just don't want to invest in this. I'll just let it be what it is. It's like, okay, great. You now have zero control and you have zero direction over the narrative of who your employer brand is. And you have put it in the hands of everyone who works
anybody.
there, everyone who doesn't work there.
Mm,
Because if you think about, like retail or fast casual, your customers might post
yeah.
about your organization. And
Yeah.
guess what? Some of the stuff they're telling is going to be tied to your employer brand.
Yep.
So the better strategy is to say, we're not going to try and assume full control, but we're also not just going to like release control entirely and let the chips fall where they may. We are going to say, this is the way we talk about employer brand, and we'll let things be outliers or we'll let things be a part of the stream of what this narrative is. A lot of the ways that I have worked with clients on this is I've said, your a lot of your leaders, a lot of your managers, regional leaders, whatever kind of company it is, they know who the big advocates are for your company. They know the folks that come in every single day with a huge smile on their face, that love what they do, that love
Mm-hmm.
the kind of work they do or the interactions they have. Start working with those folks to identify some of those employees and have conversations with them about, like, hey, I've heard that you love working here. I heard that you have your own TikTok with, 110 followers where you do little day in the life videos of, you making coffee or you doing this. Could we have some conversations with you? Could we leverage that? We love what you're putting out there.
Mm.
Would you mind if we use that? And would you like to become an ambassador for the company? 9 times out of 10, if people are already personally being vocal about their love of the company, they're going to jump on the bandwagon and say, yeah, I'll happily make a video for the company X
Mm-hmm.
TikTok page, or I'll
Yeah.
happily do a post for
Yeah.
Instagram or
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
And that's a great way to start. And the whole point is you're never going to control the whole narrative, but you can steer the biggest ship through it.
The example that I had this experience watching a client go through this, and it's not so much social media, but it was taking kind of the essence, which is short form video, and doing exactly that kind of ask, having people self-record a particular part of a narrative, a particular script, or their reflections, taking those videos and actually posting it on their culture page.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that they probably put it up on their Instagram page if they have one or they wanted to. But I thought that was a really great way, a great authentic way. It's how we're conditioned to understand people, and so it's like, hey, can you just record a video for us at your desk doing
Yeah.
this thing? You get those people, and it doesn't even have to be out in the wild. And I
Yeah.
think that's a really compelling way to do it.
It is, and it's a great way to start to build a cultural narrative at the company too. Some of those things are only meant to be shared internally.
Yeah.
I think about, companies I've worked at where they've said, hey, it's, you know, International Women's Day. Could everybody who's willing to record a quick video about, a woman that you work with here or a woman that you really admire in your personal life? And we're going to piece those all together. And now we just have this little piece of our culture that we
Yeah.
can share internally. And it's not meant to be this huge marketing piece, but it's meant to help drive the culture and it's meant to help enforce the employer brand a little more internally, which is just as important as going externally and trying to pull your candidates in.